Anybody that's new to town meeting, I call your attention to the first 3 pages of the booklet, pages 1, 2, and 3 of the booklet that tell you some things about town meeting and how it operates. And we'll actually be referring back to that later this evening. I particularly call attention on page 3, public safety. People are asked not to move chairs without permission and to follow basic rules of courtesy. And of course, the fire exits in case of an emergency. You've got 6 ways out of this room. The 2 side exits on each side are take you right outside. We can empty the place in no time for all safety purposes. I'll ask the town clerk to read the call to the meeting and the constable's return.
Thank you. Worcester SS, to a constable in the town of Berlin. Greetings. In the name of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you are hereby directed to notify and warn the inhabitants of the town of Berlin qualified to vote in town elections and town affairs to meet at the Berlin Memorial School Gym, 34 South Street, Berlin, Mass. On Monday, the 9th of December, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. Then and there to act on the following articles or in relation thereto. And you are directed to serve this warrant by posting up attested copies thereof as per vote of the town in said town 14 days at least before the time of holding said meeting, given under our hands this 14th day of November 2024. Berlin Select Board, Margaret Stone, Chair, R. Scott Hawkins, Vice Chair, Christine Keefe, Clerk. Pursuant to the within warrant, I have notified and warned the inhabitants of the town of Berlin by posting up attested copies thereof at the town hall, the town offices, and the post office at least 7 days before the time of holding said election as within directed. Kevin Pond, Constable, November 18, 2024.
Thank you. Our first thing I'd like to ask for people to do is we have a proposed rules for Berlin Town Meeting that was passed out at the entrance there this evening, which is the one that allows us to use electronic voting, which we have to pass at every meeting. If things work out later tonight, we may fix it so we don't have to do it at each meeting, but right now we still need to do that. The proposed rule is for this meeting, voting by electronic means will replace counted standing votes or votes by show of hands. Electronic votes will also be used in place of secret ballot paper votes. The moderator shall have discretion to use electronic voting when he deems it desirable to have a complete, accurate vote count. Is there a motion to adopt that rule? I hear it moved and seconded. Anything to be said on the motion? Hearing nothing further, I will ask you to vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Thank you. It's a unanimous vote. We have the voting things. Can we just do a trial on it without anything special? And I'd like you to do a trial vote. People on this side vote yes. People on this side vote no. And we'll just, and please note that there's a little window on your voting item that says, that will show you an okay to indicate that that your vote has been tabulated. You may vote now on that. Everybody getting an okay? If not, please talk to Tim, or Tim will talk to you about it, help you out with it. Okay. We had 73 people vote. "42 yes, 31 no, all of which is meaningless, but except that we want to make sure everything's working in the system. So thank you very much. All right. Oh, all right. I've been asked that an announcement could be made at this point that, of things that are happening. Tim Wysocki of the Energy Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I just wanted to make a quick announcement about the Energy Committee. We have recently been notified that the town of Berlin has met its commitments that we set out to do in 2012 for the Green Communities Program.
Put the mic up just a little bit so you're directly into it.
That was our goal, was to reduce town energy consumption by 20%. We've managed to do that through a sequence of grants that are made by the Commonwealth. And the reason for me appearing for you today is to let you know that we will be seeking to become part of the Climate Leaders Community, which is the follow-up program to the Green Communities Program. That will further allow us to access grant monies from the Commonwealth. And part of the reason why I'm asking for your time today is that we will, in future meetings, be bringing a series of things for you to decide on. The first of which is that we have a green community in good standing, which we are, that we have an energy committee, which we do, that we are committing to eliminate on-site fossil fuel use by building and operations by 2050, that we create a municipal decarbonization roadmap, that we adopt a zero-emission vehicle-first policy, and adopt a specialized opt-in building code. And the reason why we're doing this is, again, to take advantage of the funds that are coming to us. We've recently secured $200,000 to update the building management system in the town hall, and we wish to continue that with the other buildings. Thank you.
Have fun. Okay. Article 1 is a fiscal year 2025 operating budget transfer. And our select board member, Peg Stone, is here to, probably going to be a little busy tonight, I guess.
Beginning my steps in, thank you.
Yep.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you. Happy belated Thanksgiving and a pre-season's greetings for however you choose to celebrate with your family. All right, let's get down to it. Article 1, the proposed motion is that I move that the town transfer $116,000 from Public Safety Stabilization Fund to Police Department wages.
Motion is made and seconded in the same form that it was in your warrant that you received in the mail. Peg, do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, I mean, if you remember back in June, if you were here, there were quite a few more people than I think folks expected to show. And as a result, we needed additional help from our public safety, the police department. So what we would like to do on suggestions by the Department of Revenue is to move that amount of money, the $116,000, from public stabilization to the FY20 fund, police funds, and then that money flows back to free cash, which is available to the town.
The Finance Committee has a positive recommendation. Is there anything further you want to say? Anyone else want to speak to this motion? This is interesting. I'm looking over my glasses as I do when I try to read, but guess what? I need them to look out there. Okay. If not, we'll proceed to a vote, and I would like to do that electronically so that we have a recorded thing with this. It requires a 2/3 majority. So I'll ask you to vote now. We'll call the voting to a close and get the results. "72 yes and 5 no. Motion passes by the required two-thirds majority. Article 2, Public Safety Second Floor Renovation Project Funding. This is about the second floor over the fire and police stations that is to be renovated by Assabet. Peg?
The proposed motion is that I move to transfer $455,000 from the Public Safety Stabilization Fund to complete the Public Safety Second Floor Renovation Project.
Motion is made and seconded in the same form as it was in your warrant. Peg, do you want to speak to it further, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. If you drive by the town offices, you'll see a couple new trailers out there, and that's where Assabet is starting to store their goods. This is a great opportunity for the kids at Assabet to truly go from soup to nuts on this project, working with the designers and all the architects to the final build-out. The new bunkhouse, which is what I call it, will greatly help our public safety, our police, our fire, our EMS. It will help Chief Shartner to achieve some of his accreditation goals that we have. And if you look at the cost, back in '24, you graciously gave us, how much? $175,000 in funds to start the project. We were able to shift $70,000 from our ARPA funds, and now we are asking for the balance of $455,000 to fully fund the project. Please keep in mind that without these funds, it would have cost the town of Berlin over $1.8 million to get this done.
Finance Committee has a positive recommendation. Anything further? No. And Capital Planning recommendation? Capital Planning has recommended in favor also. Is there anything that someone else wants to say about this motion? Walter Bickford.
Sorry if I haven't been. Walter Bickford at 212 South Street. Sorry if I'm
Speak
not.
more directly into the mic.
I'm sorry if I'm not really on top of this stuff, but I just can't imagine if it would 1.8 million. Let's say we didn't have all. I mean, could you give just a 10-minute or 5-minute description of what it is we're building? Is it a bunkhouse? There are McMansions built all over town cheaper than this. So I don't know. I'm just curious. I'm not saying I'm against it, but it just amazes me. I'm looking at this cost, and nobody seems to. It doesn't seem to jar anybody.
Could someone explain a little bit more about what we're actually going to construct upstairs there?
I'd like to ask either Chief Shartner or Chief McQuillan to come on down.
Hear from the fire chief.
Hi, Mike McQuillan, Fire Chief. So the second floor renovation that we're doing, we're putting in total, there are 10 bedrooms that are going in the upstairs. There is a full kitchen that's going up for police and fire to share for the amenities that are there, which will include obviously modern day stuff, the dishwasher, a range, a table. There's a large area there with that dining area that exists. There are 2 new stairwells that are being built that are going into the upstairs, along with the storage room that we have for the police department. They will have, I believe it's their evidence room and the drone room that needs to be secured, and that needs to meet for the accreditation that they have. We also have a day room that's going in up there for the crews, and this allows us to be able to have right now, on the fire side, we have one sleeping quarters that the men and females share that is it's an open area, and we don't have the space to do anything else. So that's pretty much the summary of what's going on upstairs, along with, there's a couple of additional unisex bathrooms that are going in on the second floor as well. And that's pretty much the summary of what's going in on the second floor for that renovation.
Anyways, I might add that, remember, it's 24 years since we first occupied that building for fire and police. If I don't hear from anybody else, I will, this is a 2/3 majority vote because it's a stabilization, we're taking money from a stabilization fund, and I will ask you to proceed with the vote now. I will call the voting to a close. The vote is 76 yes and 6 no, which gives us the required 2/3 majority. Thank you. Article 3, purchase a police department cruiser. Peg?
I move the town to vote to transfer $71,000 from Public Safety Stabilization Fund for the purchase of a police cruiser.
Motion is made and seconded in the same form that you saw in your warrant that came out. Peg, you want to speak to it further?
Yeah, if we vote to do the money now, then there has been such a delay in ordering the cruisers that we will have the ability to have it between August and September. If we wait to put this on the Maytown meeting, then it's probably sometime in '26 that we'll get it. And also keep in mind, if we delay the vote, there will be a 3 to 8% increase. So we will be asking for more money in June compared to tonight.
We have a positive recommendation from the Finance Committee. Capital Planning? Positive vote also there. Anyone else want to speak to the motion? Don't all yell out at once. Okay, if that's the case, I'll ask you to vote. All those in favor, vote yes. Opposed, vote no. I'll close the voting. We'll get the result. 63 yes and 6 no. That gives us the required 2/3 majority. Article 4. Revocation of dedication of revenue to opioid stabilization fund. This should be good for some confusion. Peg?
I move the town vote to revoke its acceptance of the fourth paragraph of Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 5B, which allows the dedication without further appropriation of all opioid litigation settlement received to a stabilization fund established under Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 5B, and to be effective for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2024.
Okay, that is the same, again, in the same form as it was in your warrant. Peg, do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, back in 2023, you were kind enough to provide us with a opioid stabilization fund. This is the money that the state has received from going after big pharma, all the states actually going after big pharma. There has been some recent guidance from the Massachusetts Department of Revenue. We always like to follow what they give us for guidance. And what we want to do is just take that special fund vote and and remove it from move it to a stabilization fund. The funds are specific. They will be prescribed by the state. That money will go nowhere else to any other department or organization that needs money. That will stay. Those requirements by the state have yet to be determined, but think on the lines of education around opioid use.
Finance Committee has a positive recommendation. Anything further? No. Does anyone else want to speak on this? Brenna Ewing.
Brenna Ewing, 227 Pleasant Street. Could you just go over the figures again? I didn't quite hear what kind of money we're talking. Thank you.
There really aren't any figures. I mean, if you look at the description, you had in 2023 dedicated all the settlement funds received by the town of Berlin to go to a dedicated opioid stabilization. Guidance from the State Department, from Department of Revenue rather, allows these funds to be placed in a special revenue fund instead of a stabilization fund. I don't have the dollar amounts. Kristen?
Just under $50,000 right now, but there's payments in future years.
It's just under $50,000 right now, but there could be additional funding, thank you for the word, in the years to come.
Does this change the place of the money that's already been put? It just is about where it's going, what comes in the future? Yes. Okay. Special Revenue Fund. Will that require a two-thirds vote to spend later? No. No. So this would mean that if we spend it later, you wouldn't need a two-thirds vote, which you would need if it's in a stabilization fund. Town Administrator?
So the special revenue fund is putting the money into that specific fund. It can be used from there, so it doesn't require a vote, but there are state prescribed purposes for which that funding can be used they center around treatment, education, and there are several different abatement strategies. The state's put out about a 15-page document that's on their website. So we're going to be getting groups together in town, Board of Health, talking with our public safety folks, and figuring out what would be best for serving the residents of Berlin.
Who would have authority to spend it? Select Board? Yes. Anything else to be said on this motion? If not, it's again, the motion is in the form of the one that was sent out to you, and I'll ask you to vote now. Okay, we'll declare the voting closed, and the results, 74 yes, 9 no. The motion carries by the required two-thirds majority. That's an 89% favor. Article 5. amend the recreation revolving fund bylaw.
I move the town vote to amend Article 20 of the Town Berlin General Bylaws to include wages as an eligible use of recreation revolving funds for FY25 and subsequent years.
That's in the same form as the motion you have in your hand. Peg?
Rec has been putting some great programs together, especially like an after-school care program, where they're hiring counselors to go in and work with these kids, support these kids after school. What this motion will allow is for Rec to pay those counselors out of those funds.
Does anyone else want to speak on the motion? See anybody? Okay, I'll ask you to vote. All those in favor, vote yes, and opposed, no. We'll close the voting and get the result. 68 yes, 10 no. The motion passes in the affirmative. 10. Article 6, to amend the Community Preservation Act Committee bylaw. Peg.
I move the town vote to amend Article 24, Section 1 of the Town of Berlin General Bylaws as follows. Now, I'm not going to read you the entire page, so don't worry. Section 1, Establishment, if you look down at E, one member of the strike-through Housing Partnership, Massachusetts General Law 121B, Section 3, will be replaced with Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 40, Section 55C, as designated by strike-through partnership, and to be replaced with trust for a term of 3 years.
Motion is made and seconded. Now, when this was put in the warrant, it has this long whole section so you can see what the context of it is. But the only section that's being changed is subparagraph E. And as Peg has described, the old housing partnership, which has already been disbanded, is being replaced by the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, which is now in effect, and in terms of who gets to be represented on the Community Preservation Act Committee. Peg?
Yeah, I mean, Barry said it extremely well. All it is we're swapping out the defunct housing partnership member, and we're adding a member from the Municipal Affording Housing Trust that will work directly with CPA for funding.
Are there any other comments on this? I don't see any hands. This is a simple majority vote. I'll ask you to vote now. I'll close the voting. 77 yes and 7 no. And that's a simple majority, so that one's done. Article 7.
Proposed motion. I move the town vote to amend Article 2, Section 7 of the Town of Berlin General Bylaws by adding the following paragraph at the end of Section 7. When electronic voting is available, voting by electronic means will replace counted standing votes or votes by show of hands. Electronic votes will also be used in place of secret paper ballot votes. Sorry about that. The moderator shall have discretion to use electronic voting when he deems it desirable to have a complete, accurate vote count. No record shall be made which associates a particular voter with his or her vote.
Now, if you look at this, this is the same thing that we've been voting at each town meeting, with the exception of the last sentence. No record should be made which associates a particular voter with his or her vote. And that is the practice we've been following, but I think it's an important thing to put into the bylaw so that in the future, if anybody questions that, it'll be clear that nobody's supposed to be keeping that kind of a record. It is possible to keep that kind of a record, and in a representative town meeting where the other voters would have a right to know how their representative is voting, it would be a good thing to do. But in an open town meeting such as ours, you're only voting your own view, you're not representing anybody else. So therefore, it's, we can keep ours secret, and it's a useful way to use this system. I want to also call your attention to page 2 in the booklet, which has the bylaws that govern conduct of town meeting. And section 7 has several 5 paragraphs that are there, and this paragraph would be added at the end of those. And you leave all of those in place because what happens when you get here and electronic voting doesn't work tonight? Or what happens when we just can't use electronic voting on a given evening? So you have all the old rules in place to do it the old way, but at the same time that it adds the electronic voting there. If this is adopted, we will no longer have to adopt the rule for each meeting as we do it. Are there others that wish to speak?
Wayne Texera, 201 Gates Pond Road. I think it's a really good idea to make this change, but I was just interested sitting there listening to the language, and it says the moderator, he, and it's saying the his and her. So I think if it's going to be a part of the bylaw, I think being gender neutral, using they, because we don't know that's a singular gender neutral pronoun would make a lot more sense than saying he, she, or he, hers, or whatever. So
sometimes it is written S/he, so that it could be either.
well, that's fine. I just heard he.
If you'd like to make a motion to make that change, you could.
Well, I don't have a pen to do it, but you know, well, I don't have.
Hang on, you gotta write it.
Just right on the back.
No, you gotta write it. Write it on the back of
Did she give me that? Did you give me that motion?
I did, didn't I? You did. I did.
Okay. What did I do with it? I didn't give it to you. Oh, I shut it in the... You're changing the moderator to a plural?
Not plural, the they is a singular pronoun.
The motion is to amend this so that he or he, her, to they or they, theirs. It isn't, it is only he right now. You want to change the ones at the bottom too? Okay, so this is to change he to he to they in the third to last line, and his or her to they or theirs in the last line. I guess it would just be there, wouldn't it? T-H-E-I-R? Okay. Is there a second to that? I see all kinds of seconds. Anything to be said on it further, on the amendment, just on the amendment? I'll do this by voice vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Okay, the ayes have it. So now I'm going to reread this the way I think it's supposed to be and tell me if I'm off. When the last sentence, no. I'm starting in the middle. The moderator shall have discretion to use electronic voting when they deems it necessary to have a complete, accurate vote count. No record shall be made which associates a particular voter with their vote, T-H-E-I-R, vote. Right? Anybody else want to speak on it? If not, all those in favor say, well, did we already vote? I'm sorry.
I think you need to take
Brenna.
S off the D.
There. And this is going to be,
I beg your pardon. We need to take the S off deem. They deem, not they deems.
take the what?
The S on deems needs to be deem. They,
There's no S on,
yeah.
when they deems it necessary to, oh, you want to change deems?
I want to change deems to deem. I'm sorry.
But the moderator is singular.
Right, but we're using it.
And this they is actually,
I
would
need a
therefore
minute.
also be singular. You want to move it? Write out the motion.
Second? Anyone?
No, I'll call for that. The motion is to change deems, D-E-E-M-S, to deem, D-E-E-M. Take the S off it. Is there a second? Motion is made and seconded. Anybody want to talk about it? Okay, all those in favor of taking the S off of deem, say aye. Those opposed, no. Not much. Okay, so we've got this one changed to deem now. I will again read the sentences that have been changed. The moderator shall have discretion to use electronic voting when they deem it desirable to have a complete, accurate vote count. No record shall be made which associates a particular voter with their vote, T-H-E-I-R there. Okay? Are we ready to vote on the whole thing now? Okay. If so, I'll ask you to vote electronically. All those in favor? And opposed? I'll call the voting to a close and we'll get the result. 76 yes, 13 no. The motion carries in the affirmative. Town Clerk, do you think we've got all of those things fixed right?
We'll see.
Okay. Peg.
Article 8, proposed motion. I move the town vote to authorize the Select Board to petition the General Court of the Commonwealth to enable the recall of elected officials consistent with this suggested format, and if that legislation is enabled, that it be recorded as a special chapter in the Town of Berlin bylaws as on file in the Town Clerk's office.
Motion is made and seconded in the form that it was in your warrant. Peg, you want to speak to it?
Yeah, just a little history on the recall bylaw. I presented this at Coffee Talk, so I wanted to bring it again. The recall bylaw is not a new thing. The right of citizens to recall elected officials is believed to have been mentioned first in the Massachusetts Charter of 1691, so obviously it's been around for a while. You might want to say, ooh, well, how many recall campaigns have there been? That's an excellent question. I have the answer for you. There was one, so far one in 2024, 4 in 2023, 4 in 2022, 3 before that, and 4 before that. So obviously it's not widely used. To clarify, this is for town elected officials only, not those that are appointed. So people like the Select Board, people like Board of Health. If you look at your town report on page 2, there's a couple columns. The left-hand side will give you all the ones that are elected, and then on the right side and continuing on the next page is for appointed. This does not need to match anything that Boylston may or may not have. We don't tell them how to vote and unvote their people. They do not tell us how to vote and unvote our people. This does not impact the school committee. If there is such a bylaw, it would need to be done, raised, and voted on by the school committee and the district administrators. So again, this is only town elected officials. And you can see by the length of this bylaw, it's not an easy thing. It's not like you could stand up and go, hey, you know what, I really hate the Grinch, so I'm going to recall Peg. There are numbers that you need to get. There are specific reasons that you need to get. There is process and procedure. Think of the example that Scott said. He could, and he won't, and he will never, steal all the money in the town of Berlin. And Eric comes up and he arrests him, and Scott goes to jail. Scott is still an elected official. He can do whatever he wants in his lovely orange suit from behind bars. With this bylaw, you have the right as the voter to put something in place to recall that elected official and get them out of their position.
Is there, Tom Andrew?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I think it's commendable that we do have a recall for the reasons that that Peg just indicated. However, I would point out that recalls are very disruptive, and if recalls are done by a group of people who disagree with the decision rather than misconduct, once these are initiated, they take a lot of time, they take a lot of energy, they take a lot of attention. So I would move to amend Section 2 of the proposed elected official recall bylaw by requiring 100 registered voters' signatures on the initiating petition.
Write it as a motion for me, Tom.
I have it.
You've got it. The motion is to amend Section 2 of the proposed elected official recall bylaw by requiring 100 registered voter signatures on the initiating petition. Is there a second? Okay.
Just to speak to it, I would say that 50 votes, I could go down to the transfer station and speak vaguely while people were distracted by other things, and get 50 votes to reintroduce the bubonic plague. So I think having a little higher threshold to start this is a good idea. Again, I'm certainly in favor of having a recall provision in our bylaw.
Well, this is now, we're dealing with the amendment only. Does anybody want to speak about the amendment, either to change the 50 to 100 or whatever? Evie? Evie Dewick?
Hi there, I'm Evie Dewick. I live at 48 Highland most of the time. I guess I would like to speak about the article, and I'm not supposed to, but it's sort of all connected. So I think this idea is a bad one because I think that it's not necessary. I think that we have good laws in place to put people in jail if they do bad things. And in my 30 years of living here, we have struggled to get people to be elected to positions. In fact, a lot of times there's a blank in the voting thing, and hardly ever is there a contest for a position. And if I think about running for something like library trustees or something, and I think that there's a Facebook post about something, and then I get worried that people are going to vote against me, it just feels very discouraging. So in my 30 years here, there's really never been anybody that's done anything wrong, and if they do, they can get voted against. So if Scott goes to jail, Peg and Chris can vote against whatever he votes on. There's always a committee that can vote against it. I think it sets a bad tone for our town to not talk to each other, because there's only 3,000 of us. Certainly we can go to a public meeting and talk to the person that we don't like, instead of going behind and getting 100 signatures saying that we hate them. Thank you.
Let's remember that we're only talking about changing the 50 to 100 right now. That's the only thing we need to talk about. We can talk about the general thing after we've dealt with this amendment. Is this about the number of signatures? Yes, go ahead. Just pull the mic out and bring it down.
Hi, my name is Charlene DeCaligiero. I live at 56 Village Court. I would say that people are unlikely to do this kind of thing at the drop of a hat. To get the number of signatures we're talking about here would involve quite a bit of effort on someone's part. So I think that the article as currently written seems fine, although I don't even see the 50 part. It seems like it's not an absolute figure, isn't it? Percentages, am I reading this wrong?
No, Section 2.
Section 2, okay, I see. That's just initiating the recall. And then there has to be a vote. So this number is just to start the process. But again, door knocking and talking to folks, that involves quite a bit of effort as it is. I think for the article to be useful, it can't have, it should have a certain amount of slowing down, but not be impossible to reach or very difficult or expensive to reach. Thank you.
We have 3,007 voters currently, the town clerk wants to remind you. That's lots of people. Tim?
Tim Wysocki, I'm actually functioning as the election warden on this comment. Our last 3 elections, the town elections, were in the ballpark. Most recently was 103, I think, James, something to that respect. So if you look at the last 3, which have been uncontested election, we've had a very low turnout. This amendment would effectively make the initiation number to be almost identical to the actual petition. So that's something to bear in mind when you're viewing this amendment. Additionally, if you go back further, we've had in contested elections, those numbers do go up, which would make this amendment more practical, but we are in a stage right now where the total number of votes of the town election has been very low. Thank you.
Are there others? Thomas? And I'll call you in a minute, Walter.
I would just say that the point that Tim made was one of the things that I was thinking about when I put this amendment on the table, that because of uncontested elections, the second stage, which when you first look at it says, oh, there's a whole bunch of hurdles to get over. But if you look at the facts that Tim just indicated, they may not be so much. So that, that was one of the reasons why I suggested that we create the one hard number, which is the initiating petition, as being a little bit higher. And I don't think 100, is a huge number to get out of, 3,000 odd voters.
Walter Bickford?
Thank you, Walter Bickford. I support this amendment wholeheartedly. In fact, I oppose the article. Totally unnecessary. But I want to strengthen it. This is a good move. This idea of recall, I'm coming from I've had the great privilege of being elected about every office in town, represented the town in the legislature, and I feel very strongly about it. But I can't imagine in Berlin, and nobody's had more difference of opinion with elected people than me, but I can't imagine even thinking of recalling anybody. And if anybody commits some heinous act, it isn't going to happen in Berlin. To vote for this, we're kind of admitting we have this kind of problem in our town. We don't. This is Berlin. We don't need this. Vote for the 100. If I feel like I'm amending it to 200, but I'm going to support this 100 amendment, then I'm going to oppose the article.
Okay, let's remember, we're talking about, is it going to be 100 or 50? That's the thing that we've got on the docket right now. Anyone else want to speak to the amendment? If not, I'll ask you to vote. If you want to have it 100 registered voters to initiate it, you vote yes. If you want it to be 50 voters to initiate it, you vote no. Please vote now. I'll close the voting and we'll get the results. 58 yes, 24 no. Okay, now we return to the proposed motion, which is to adopt, or rather to make the petition to the general court in regard to having recall from town offices. And it is the same plan that it was before, except that we now require 100 registered voters to initiate a recall petition. Are there others that want to speak on the general subject of whether we adopt the recall or not? Oh. Noel.
Noel Rosenberg, 21 Village Lane. This just brings us into line with a lot of the other cities and towns in Massachusetts to have a way to deal with situations that are unusual. It does not, we don't have, this is not dealing with an emergent situation. This is, planning ahead for a scenario that we hope never comes to pass, but at some point might.
This is, sorry, I'm shorter.
So you can speak directly into it.
This is not unusual, as Noel pointed out, and the idea that this couldn't happen in Berlin. I am somebody who, in communities I have been a part of where horrible things were discovered by the nicest person in the community, the idea that we would have to continue having that person in a position in our town because we weren't able to recall them, I find it bizarre, the idea that these things couldn't happen in Berlin. These things happen everywhere, and we should have the ability to say, actually, no, I'm not okay with this person in any way representing my town or me to this town. Thank you. Oh, God, I didn't say who I was. Tamara Amadon, 211 Pleasant Street, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, over here.
Charlene DeCalagero, Village Court. So the reason why I support this article is because, as has been said, there's nothing special about Berlin other than the people who do the wonderful things and all that, but there's no, this is not, we are not extra special humans. We're just ordinary humans. And this kind of recall is not necessarily about hating someone, and I don't think it would pass if it were. In Lancaster, somewhere between 10 and 15 years ago, 2 select board members were recalled because they called a secret select board meeting, which violates open meeting law, which is a state law. It was a huge amount of effort, probably very similar, if not the same, as the warrant that we're going to vote on tonight. And they had greatly upset people because they were making decisions in secret. Who wouldn't want to recall folks? That would not be personal. Bringing it before the AG, I think it's the Attorney General's office who enforces open town meeting law, but it doesn't prevent somebody like that, a select board member or another board member, from making decisions between the time when somebody finds out about it and if the AG does anything or not. This gives us the power to say there are some kinds of acts that we will not accept that are irresponsible or pernicious, and we can remove them. I hear what Evie's saying. She's concerned that maybe we'd have more difficulty finding people to run for positions. I don't think that would worry most people, because it's like, you know, if you're going to think about embezzling, maybe I don't want to run because I might be recalled. I don't think that's going to happen. I think most people who run are very much interested in the well-being of the town's citizens and of the town as a whole. But in those rare occasions, we should be able to act. Thank you.
Others wish to speak on this? Yes.
I'm Catherine Jernay. I'm 60 Village Court. I'd just like to say that good government is about good checks and balances. This is just a check and a balance. It's not aimed at anybody. It's just a good idea.
Brenna Ewing?
Just a tiny bit of history, and I don't remember all the details, but 30 years ago, perhaps, there was a town official west of here that embezzled a lot of money and from the town, and then he was in the job and they couldn't get rid of him. This is why we should vote on this. I mean, if somebody is nefarious and doing nefarious things, and a lot of people find out, you don't want them charged in court and all that, and then he still has his position, and no. We need to vote for this. It's a good idea.
Anyone else? Walter?
About an hour ago, I refreshed my ethics commitment to the state. If you're an official in Massachusetts, appointed or
Hold the
elected,
mic up a little bit.
every year you have to be approved by the Ethics Commission. And when you I spent an hour in front of the computer answering questions, studying, and I got it all right, by the way, the answers in the end. But you can't breathe sideways, but the Ethics Commission isn't going to get you one way or another. And again, I may be a throwback. I came to town in the mid-40s, grew up in this town, like I say, been an officer with all kinds of people, most of who I disagreed with, as they disagreed with me. Not a one of them did I have any disrespect for or have any concern that would do anything wrong. It's like Evie pointed out, what are we, 3,000 people now or something? Give me a break. We're a rural country town. This isn't, it's just the principle of it. Vote against it, please. I'm going to.
Anyone else? Okay, I think we're getting ready to vote here. The motion is, I move that the town vote to authorize the select board to petition the General Court of the Commonwealth to enable the recall of elected officials consistent with this suggested format, and that if that legislation is enabled, that it be recorded as a special chapter in the Town of Berlin's bylaws as on file in the town clerk's office. And that's with the change in section 2 from any 50 registered voters to any 100 registered voters. And you can vote now electronically. I'll call the voting to close. 70 yes, 16 no. So the motion carries. This is a simple majority. Article 9.
Article 9, proposed motion. I move the town vote to accept the provisions of General Law, Chapter 44, subsections 54B, C, and D, to allow town trust funds to be invested in accordance with General Law, Chapter 203C, the so-called prudent investment rule.
Motion is made and seconded. Peg, you want to speak to it?
Oh, no, I don't, but Kristen does.
Okay, well, who would like to? Kristen?
So adopting this would allow for diversification of our investments. So right now in Massachusetts, there's a small legal list of investments that cities and towns can use. It's rather restrictive, and it doesn't allow for as large of a return on investment. This would allow towns to do things more similar to what is done in the private sector, but there would still need to be an investment policy that assesses risk and makes sure that the town's funds are protected, but it would allow for, mitigating some of that risk through diversification and also hopefully bringing more back in. It's very similar to what they do when they look at a 401k and they look at your age and they look at the types of investments that you should have. It just basically allows us to bring in more interest and more revenue on the town funds.
Anyone else want to speak on this? The Finance Committee recommends in favor. Anything further? No. Anybody else want to speak on this? If not, I'm going to ask you to vote electronically, please. I'll close the voting. "70 yes, 9 no. The motion carries in the affirmative. Article 10, repurpose funding for old fire station roof replacement. Peg.
Article 10, I move the town vote to transfer $28,500 from Article 7-2 of the FY22 special town meeting to fund all costs associated with the demolition of the old fire station and former rescue building on West Street.
Want to speak to it, Peg?
Yep. So about a year or so ago, we had an independent third party come in and assess all the town buildings. There's about 12 of them. For those of you who haven't read the information, they are found on the townofberlin.com website, and all you got to do is type in facility studies in the little search bar, and you get these little summaries of the buildings. There is one word that is pretty prevalent and repetitive when you're talking about the old fire station and the old rescue building, aka Rudolph building. That word is poor. These buildings were built 50 years ago. Minimal, if any, type of maintenance on the original construction. Together, the buildings sit on about 7.76 acres of land. Can't really do anything with it. The infrastructure is aged. The plumbing, electrical, HVAC all need to be replaced. What's slightly ironic is that the old fire department building doesn't have fire suppression, so you'd need to put that in there. The parking lot would need to be redone from this. The cracks inside the buildings are obviously closed to the public for safety reasons. When you're inside the building, there are holes in the ceiling, there are holes in the wall, there are holes in the concrete. We're not talking hairline cracks, we're talking I can shove my hand through the crack in the building, in the walls rather. I'd like to note that town meeting does not have the jurisdiction over whether these buildings are used or demolished. Your vote tonight is only to allow us to have that money that was once going towards a roof on the old fire station. This vote doesn't mean that we won't demo the buildings. The select board has voted. It has been talked about at multiple select board meetings. We invited capital planning a month or so ago to also talk to them about the costs of doing this. If you're looking at getting those two buildings current, just barely current, it's going to cost the town about 50 grand, add in inflation costs, so jack that up. Someone had asked at Coffee Talk about insurance. Currently, on those two buildings, we're paying over $1,000 on premiums for buildings that are just sitting there and deteriorating. Wouldn't that be nice if that could return to the town? Okay.
Finance Committee has a positive recommendation. Anything further? No. Capital Planning recommendation? Positive. Capital Planning is positive. Do others wish to speak? Brenna Ewing.
Hi, Brenna Ewing, 227 Pleasant Street. I want to speak to the little building, the white one, that is the former ambulance building. The town voted before COVID to make that a museum, which I think is a good idea. And I think it's also a good idea to put a road there to access 62 from the fire station. There is an existing road to the north, to the west of the building, and it could be wider. So in my view, it's a good idea to think about not demolishing the white one, but running the road up to it and putting it on a trailer and rolling it down the hill into the field and using it to store the old fire truck. I doubt that it's in such terrible condition that it has to be torn down. Thank you.
Hello, Dawn Miller. I live at 16 West Street. I am the only neighbor of the old fire station and rescue barn. I can visually see that they are dilapidated, sidings falling off, windows are broken, foundations are irreparable. They are not safe to walk around, never mind go into. What is going to happen to that property, I am controversial about. There have been several cars that have gone over my wall and into my yard. Do I believe in the future a road should be there? No. I do not believe, in my understanding, that that property belongs to the town. It belongs to a local. But the buildings themselves are not safe. So I am in favor of not demolition.
Paul McKell.
Paul McKellick, 119 Carter Street. When you look at the old fire station, anybody that's thinking about reusing it, the doors are lethal opening up onto Route 62. You want to move the doors around to the side? Okay, maybe, but at what cost? And I heard a number of $50,000. I think that's frankly ludicrous. We currently have two projects in this town that are hamstrung because of prevailing wage. Can't get any traction on them because prevailing wage pushes the costs so high that it becomes pretty much untenable. And that's what we would be looking at with these two buildings. I really don't see any salvageability there. I've been involved in resurrecting a couple old buildings, some in town, some outside of town, and my personal experience is the town would be better served if they were not there.
Peg?
Just to clarify, so in my hand are the property cards for those two buildings. The current owner is listed as the town of Berlin. I know that there is a lot of folklore about who owns the buildings, but they are under the jurisdiction of the town of Berlin. And again, for anybody who wants to read the assessment, it's online. But here, let me just give you a few highlights. Exterior wall, poor condition, cost estimate $7,000. Electrical system, poor condition, cost estimate $23,000. There's a few more. I'm going to try and find some good ones. Hang on. Oh, here's a good one. Flooring, poor condition, cost estimate to repair $13,700, exterior fixture with lamp. So if that was true, that it was voted to be a museum, it was done before this study's done. This study is showing that those two buildings are not repairable unless the town wishes to incur quite a bit of money over the next 10 years to put them in there. And as we said, it's on 0.76 acres of land. There's not much we could do with it. There is talk of what we could potentially do way later on down the road to help out fire and police and EMS to maybe have a road come up out of there, but that's when you're dealing with the state on roads, so that's way in the future to not be talked about. But tonight, we are just asking for that money that was going to go on a roof to a building that truly is in no condition to be repaired. We will match that money with ARPA money that we have put aside. We received an approximate estimate of, like 43,000 to basically tear down those buildings, take away everything that's in there, and then refurbish it. Obviously, it's not a solid quote. We need to go through the process, but we needed to get an idea of how much money. So that's what we're asking for. A new roof will never go on that building. So we would like to take the money that is there and move it towards the demolition of those two buildings.
Paul?
My apologies, I forgot 2 points. 0.76 acres, you're talking about reusing two buildings, and I haven't heard anything said about septic or water. And if you're going to use them as public buildings, both those items have to be addressed. And I'm on the Board of Health, and I see that as being very problematic, not just for me, but through state regulations.
Walter Bickford?
Walter Bickford, 212 South Street. Let me see if I can carry this one like I did the other ones I spoke on. You know what I'm thinking of, this earlier article we have and how people get signatures, just like a lynch mob. I was in that fire station today, the old one. It isn't 50 years old, it's 130 years old. It's the first fire barn that Berlin had, okay? It's in good shape. I was down cellar, the studs are all right. Anybody, if you hire a consultant, it's because you don't know what you're doing, and no consultant is going to come in and tell you, oh, it's all right. They're going to tell you, oh, 50,000 for this, 60,000. That can't be done. It can be done. Falling apart, there's a few loose clapboards on it. There's a broken window, I'll fix it for you for nothing. You know, here's where I'm coming from. You know where the 1870 town hall was? Well, that was condemned. If you had a consultant go in there and tell you how to fix it up, it would have been $500,000. Well, I and a couple other guys got together, we rolled up our sleeves. I spent weeks underneath it, shoveling out the cellar. We replaced sills, we replaced floors, no cost to you. I got somebody from New Hampshire to donate flooring for Barnes Hall. It didn't cost you anything. This business, if you got to go and hire a consultant, umpty nine for this and umpty nine for, it's baloney. You could put another tar paper roof on it. I worked in factories in Lawrence, Malden Mills. They were 150 years old, flat roofs. They didn't leak. They took care of them. The problem is, 10 years ago, when the selectmen should have been on the ball and looking after these buildings, they didn't. So we do have a leaky roof. Big deal. Put a roof on it. It doesn't have to be a $50,000 rubber roof. Put on rolled tar paper. As far as the wooden building goes, that foundation and the sills are as in good a shape as was in that 1870 town hall 15 years ago. And look at that building today. It's historic. And this building is historic. It was the original fire barn. And I would ask you to vote against this, because I can tell you, just do it temporarily, because it'll come back again, believe me. Vote against it for now, and a couple of us, I'll get a group of people, we'll see the selectmen, we'll take a look at it, and we'll write a report and convince you that it's salvageable. As far as heat and storage, Paul, if there's no occupancy, there's no need for a storage system. It should be a storage shed. We've got more historical artifacts that we need to store and take care of right now than we have space. To tear down that perfectly good space, particularly the historic one, I mean, I don't want either one of them, but at least the 130-year-old first fire barn in Berlin, it is in good shape. We should not be tearing it down. If you don't think I'm right, at least give me the benefit of the doubt. Just vote now against it at this particular time, and I promise you, I'll see to it that facts come out, we know what we're talking about, and believe me, it'll be up again the next town meeting. If I'm wrong, vote it down then. But don't just carte blanche hang this like a lynch mob, hang this building because a few people have get everybody excited. We should preserve that historic building. We have a good use for it.
My final comment on this is that professionals were brought in to review the buildings. This is what they do. This is what we paid them to do. And I would like to remind the town that volunteers who are all ready to jump in and do things, you need contracts with the town, you need insurance to indemnify the town, and you need approval. So please don't think that just because someone will come up with a hammer and replace something, it cannot be done without the proper policies and procedures which need to be followed and which will be followed.
Are there any different voices to be heard? Yes.
Heidi Petard, 138 Derby Road. I think we've gotten away from what the article actually reads that we're voting on. I believe it's already been decided that the buildings are going to be demolished. What we're voting on is to move money that was already approved for the roof to move it towards funding the demolition. So we shouldn't be debating whether these buildings are or are not going to be demolished. That's not what the motion is about.
Others? If not, the motion is to transfer $28,500 from Article 7.2 of the fiscal year 22 special town meeting to fund all costs associated with the demolition of the old fire station and former rescue building on West Street. Please vote electronically now. I'll close the voting. 68 yes, 19 no. The motion passes. Article 11, fifth modification of the River Bridge Development Agreement. Peg.
These are the same. 11 and 12 are the same. All right, we'll get you the printed. read it from the book. No, the printout is the same. Sorry, we had a little bit of a repetition on the articles that we give to Barry. So the proposed motion for Article 11 is I move the town vote to approve Article 11 relative to the fifth modification of the River Bridge Development Agreement and the modification and transfer of the associated conservation restriction as written. We're working on it.
Is the as written referring to the description below?
Yes. Appreciate your patience.
What's this?
That's the motion, because unfortunately we had copies of the same motion on the table that I couldn't hand you. So it reads as it is in there. I couldn't hand you one that was pre-printed because unfortunately we had two number 12s and not a number 11. Yeah, it's the same that's in the warrant. We just
Okay, so
needed to.
now we have the motion that is written in your warrant,
Correct.
and I guess that's what you read us before.
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Do you want to speak to it?
Nope. Kristen does.
Who does?
She does.
Ah. Kristen, our town administrator.
I'll be honest, I had hoped to not speak on this matter at a town meeting again, but unfortunately, we are here. We are here because as we started to do the acquisition of the parcels after it was voted, the last modification was voted in May, in order for the town to acquire the property, the conservation restriction that exists on the property must be transferred to another entity because the town cannot hold its own conservation restrictions. So what happens is we would lose that conservation restriction, which we don't want to do. We want to preserve that. So there's this process in order to transfer the conservation restriction to a third party involves a process called Article 97, which is a rather cumbersome process which has changed in the last several years and become increasingly challenging, the purpose of which is to keep land in conservation status and keep people from being able to take it out. However, when it is a situation like this where it's a transfer of property, unfortunately it makes things a little more or a lot more complicated than it, unfortunately has to be. So it does require the town meeting approval. It does require us to get approval from the state and special legislation. It will take at least another year, unfortunately, for us to obtain all of these full approvals before we can purchase the property. There is also a slight amendment we are requesting to the conservation restriction that be made, because right now the wells that are on the property that have water are only allowed to be used by the property owner. And there is interest from adjacent property owners in that water, and that is a way to potentially bring some revenue back to the town, which is part of what we wanted to do with this agreement from the beginning. So we did approach the Conservation Commission and requested their authorization to make that change in order to allow the water to be used not just by the property owner. They did vote unanimously to recommend to town meeting to make that change. I will let them speak to it further if you would like more information on that. But this basically has a couple of purposes, and I apologize for the long-winded explanation, but it's a little bit complicated. So the first extends the deadline for us to purchase the property from December 31st of this year to December 31st of 26 to allow time for that modification and the transfer of the conservation restriction. And then it also allows us to be able to hopefully get through all of the state processes that are necessary, make those modifications, be able to use those wells as an asset that we can hopefully help some of the neighbors with the water. And there is a fifth modification to the development agreement required as part of that. The two things that come from that is just that extension on the date, as well as clarification that the Boundless Adventures rent do go to Riverbridge until the closing of this agreement. So those are the two essential provisions that the fifth modification provides for, and I'm happy to answer any questions that folks might have.
Is there a comment from Conservation?
So Conservation wasn't very excited when we were first approached by the Select Board and Kristen about modifying this. But really and truly, the only modification is who gets to use the water. There is no difference in the conservation value of the property. There is no difference in the protection level of the property. And once this process goes through, as Kristen said, the conservation restriction will be held by a third party, hopefully Sudbury Valley trustees, because they're familiar with us and we're familiar with them. We have started conversations with them about that, and when I mentioned a potential modification to the CR, I learned that it's actually not all that unusual, especially for more administrative kinds of modifications like we're asking for. So we had a good long meeting. Kristen came, and I think Peg was there too. Came to our meeting. We had a good long conversation about it, and did eventually vote to allow the town to be able to sell the water.
What about Planning Board? Is there anything from Planning Board on it? Okay. Abby Dewick.
Hi, Abby Dewick, 48 Highland. So just a question for the Planning Board. I know on your table or your plate, you had suggested that that property be used for cottage housing? No? Okay. So maybe? Yep. Okay, thank you. So my question is, how does this affect that possible plan? I know we haven't voted on it, but I just wanted to see if it affects that plan. And then I have one other question, and I don't know who it goes to, but I've heard that those wells are in serious disrepair. I don't know if that's true. Maybe it's not true, but I don't know anything about wells. Paul might know. No, they're not in disrepair. Okay, I don't know. So, in line of maintenance, we tend to not take care of things in our town. Well, we do, but we don't sometimes. I just want to know if somebody's thinking about it, if we're waiting another 2 years, is somebody paying attention to the wells? So those two questions. Thank you.
Kristen?
So I'm not speaking on behalf of the Planning Board, but we intend to retain some of that water or water rights for any potential future use that the town may want to do on that property. And in terms of the well, we did have an adjacent property owner who looked at those wells. They are not in significant disrepair. There is a few mechanical items, I think a couple of computer sort of related screens that need to be updated, but the wells are actually still activated and working and in working condition. So that's not a significant cost that I would even look to the town necessarily to bear. That would be something that we would definitely negotiate with a potential future user of that site. But we did have it's surrounded by a well house, and I don't know if Evie might be referring to the tree that fell on the house at one point. So that has been removed and the roof has been replaced on the pump house. And so it did not damage anything internally to the pump house itself.
Anyone else speak on this motion? Mary Porter.
Eggstone. Mr. Moderator, Mary Porter, 8 Highland Street. I just want to stay, but before I speak, please vote for this because it extends for a year the town's option to acquire this property, and I think it's important that we focus on that. But I have a few questions that I wasn't able to get answers earlier. So I remain a bit confused about the sentence in the description that says the commission will need to transfer the CR to a nonprofit entity prior to the town's acquisition. Is there an authority? Is this under the law in Massachusetts? Does anybody have a cite to it? I'd be curious to look at it. We can perhaps talk later, but yeah, or go ahead, yeah.
It is my understanding that the town cannot own the property and also hold the conservation restriction. So right?
Well, that's kind of what I'm questioning, and because of I'm just questioning that one sentence, and do we want to vote on the description with that sentence in it? Because I'm curious if there's an actual provision that says that, and maybe I'm confused, but
It's state law.
Doesn't the town own other property with CRs on it?
We don't hold the CRs. Sudbury Valley Trustees holds the CR.
I see.
And that
on all of those properties.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
All right. That's helpful. And from my other hat on FinCom, any further delay in getting this process done is to the financial detriment of the town, because we're not getting revenue. And I think we agreed to give up our half in the last amendment, didn't we? Past due. But the current, we'll be going forward to split it? 100%, but after acquisition of the parcel.
Directly to the whole group and not to each other up front.
My apology. I'm just looking at the rent revenues from Boundless Adventures and wondering how they're impacted with this news that we've got here. And Kristen has the answers, as always. Thank you.
My apologies. So we're supposed to split the rents 50-50. Part of the agreement that you passed at Maytown meeting is as soon as we own that parcel that Boundless Adventures sits on, we will get 100% of those rents. Does that answer?
So we really want to own the parcel soon, right? Right. That's my point. Thank you.
And we will be moving as quickly as possible.
Is there anybody else? Yes.
Kim Bratton, 75 Boylston Road. Just question, so the Sudbury Trust owns a conservation restriction, but they don't own the land? Is that how does that even make sense? I mean, oh, sorry. How does that?
Speak into the microphone and make
sure
your question, and then we'll see if we can get an answer.
Mr. Moderator, if allowed,
Yes.
I'd like to introduce Heather White from Town Council, who can probably answer a lot of these questions.
That's acceptable.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Heather White, Town Council. So there is a common law doctrine called the doctrine of merger, whereby a property owner can't hold a restriction on its own property because the restriction would merge with ownership of the land. And that applies to all kinds of restrictions. As far as conservation restrictions, the owner of the property and the holder of the conservation restriction need to be two separate entities. And that is something that's been recognized by the state ever since the state has been involved in approving conservation restrictions. More recent restrictions, the state will require a provision that explicitly says right in the conservation restriction that the holder and the owner of the property cannot be the same. But even in restrictions where that language isn't explicitly written, the doctrine still applies. So in order for the state to approve this amendment to the restriction that will be required in order to change the allowed use of the wells, they will also be looking at who is the holder of the restriction and who is the owner of the property.
And what is the benefit to Sudbury that they do the management of it, of the property? I don't really know what they get out of it. Sorry.
So I can't speak to the benefit to Sudbury Valley trustees, but they are a nonprofit entity that is established for a specific set of purposes, one of which includes conservation of land, and they do hold a number of restrictions on town property currently. So this would add to their restrictions that they oversee.
And who wants the water if we own the property?
I'll let somebody else answer that.
Kristen.
Water is a precious commodity in this town, as many of you know, and there are several adjacent property owners that have expressed potential interest in the water, one of which is Cordelia's Farm. Another is the Stevens Foundation that is adjacent. There's also a couple of other potential developments going on at the Worcester Sand and Gravel site. We're not sure. That's in the very early stages. We don't know what their plans are right now, but there is a pretty significant amount of development and future need going on in that area.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mike Topman, Derby Road. Listening to Mary's questions there, Mary, great questions as usual. Makes me think back to May. If I remember correctly, there was in exchange for this, we gave up the collection of certain property tax revenue, something, was it in the range of $250,000 in past due taxes or something? Could you speak to that? And if we're going to delay it 2 years, are there additional property taxes that we might or might not collect?
Kristen?
So we didn't give up any property taxes. Those are still being assessed and paid. What we did give up was a couple of back years owed of the 50% of the Boundless Adventures rents that amounted to about $250,000. So we were initially set up under this agreement to get 50% of those rents. Unfortunately, given some situations with the developer, that was something that they were unable to make payments on. So we negotiated additional land that would be ours, as well as full ownership of those wells, which were shared before, which means the town could not sell access or rights to the water, which we now can. We also got additional piece of property up there. We now have parcels 6A and 6B that we're allowed to authorize, and we received a $550,000 payment for improvements to the bridge and road down at the Rotary down there. So there were concessions, but there were also gains. And so that was where we were at as of the May town meeting. This does push out our ability to collect those rents in full, but unfortunately our hands are a bit tied by the state process.
Are you ready to vote? At this point, the motion is the same one that was printed as the proposed motion under Article 11. So I won't read it again. I will ask you to vote now. I will close the voting. "71 yes and 9 no. The motion passes by the required two-thirds majority. The percentage is 88.75% in favor. And Article 12. Peg?
Last one. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for being here. We'll see you at the next town meeting in May. The proposed motion is that I move the town vote to transfer $501,454 from the Affordable Housing Donation accounts to the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust.
Motion is made and seconded in the form that it was as the proposed motion. Finance Committee recommends in favor. Is there anyone else that wants to comment? Am I seeing a hand somewhere? Are you?
Hello, Phil
Turn
Mullins.
the microphone up so it's up even with your mouth. Yeah.
Yes, Phil Mullins, 9 Wheeler Hill Road. Can someone from finance just describe what the amounts of the funds, and could you tell us, I'm a Highland Ridge owner, what the amounts were paid or potentially paid? Could you describe the amount that was paid by, if any, by the developer at Highland Ridge? Thank you.
Kristen?
So nothing from Highland Ridge, this is just Highland Commons. So just a development agreement there.
Do others wish to speak? Okay, the motion is to transfer $501,454 from the Affordable Housing Donation accounts to the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. Please vote now. I'll close the voting. "64 yes, 9 no. The motion carries in the affirmative. Before we jump all up and run out, please exit through the 2 doors at the back of the room and make sure you leave your voting instruments with somebody who has a box for them there at the door. I'll ask that people help us pick up the chairs. That helps us an awful lot and gets the school in business in the morning. Is there a motion to dissolve the meeting?
I make the motion.
Peg has moved to dissolve the meeting. It is seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries in the affirmative.